This is TechKnow, a show about innovations that can change lives.
The science of fighting a wildfire.
We're going to explore the intersection of hardware and humanity, and we're doing it in a unique way. This is a show about science by scientists. Let's check out our team of hardcore nerds. Lindsay Moran is an ex-CIA operative and analyst. Tonight, the smart gun. New technology could make guns safer, but does it work? We put it to the TechKnow test.
So if I wrestle the gun from you.
Kyle Hill is a science writer with a background in engineering. Tonight, earthquakes. They're frightening, devastating, and can strike without warning. But what if scientists could warn you?
So this red circle is here is what we have to worry about.
They can.
Earthquake, earthquake.
Dr. Shini Somara is a mechanical engineer. And I'm Phil Torres, I'm an entomologist. That's our team, now let's do some science. Hey guys, welcome to TechKnow. I'm Phil Torres, and here with me today, Kyle Hill, Dr. Shini Somara, and Lindsay Moran. Now Lindsay, as the only former CIA operative amongst us, as far as I know, of course, you are our in-house security specialist. And in this story, you got to look at a smart gun that comes with a bit of controversy.
That's right, Phil, and we'll talk about the controversy later. But first, let's look at the technology. It's kind of ironic that after years of working for the CIA in a variety of danger zones, I finally got to try out some gadgetry worthy of James Bond in the form of a high-tech, personalized handgun. Let's have a look. When I worked at the CIA and sometimes had to carry a gun, I worried that as a woman, I could be overpowered and have my gun taken and used against me. Now, as a mom of 2 young boys, gun safety is a huge concern in my household. According to the latest statistics, each day, approximately 5 children are killed or injured accidentally by guns. The newest smart gun on the market, the IP-1, by German manufacturer Armatix, is designed to alleviate both of these concerns by personalizing the weapon's ability to fire.
So this works like a regular firearm. If we don't tell civilians that there's batteries in here, they would never know.
But there's a watch here, so this watch is for...
If 2 months from now you decide, you know what, I'm ready now to personalize my firearm, I don't want my children to activate the gun, you can sync your watch to the firearm and it becomes a personalized handgun. Now, once you've synced the watch to the firearm, then it requires a PIN code.
Armatix CEO Belinda Padilla demonstrates how the gun can only be set to fire up to 8 hours once the PIN code on the watch is activated, and as long as the watch is within 10 inches of the gun. All right, I want to try out the personalized version.
Okay, great.
Because I have the watch, I'm the only one who can use it, right?
Correct.
That's because the gun and the watch communicate by radio frequency. An electronic chip inside the watch signals to another electronic chip inside the gun, telling it to unlock. Both are operated by regular household batteries. My only apprehension would be, in the heat of the moment when there's an intruder, am I going to be able to get the watch on, activate it? I'm going to be thinking about saving my life. How am I going to have the wherewithal to use all the technology?
The most important thing is practice and feeling comfortable with your firearm.
What if the unauthorized user gets the watch and the handgun?
If they steal the watch and the handgun, unless they know my code, they can't activate the handgun.
But what if someone tries to take the gun after it's been activated with the PIN code? Padilla demonstrates for me with an unloaded IP-1.
If someone was wrestling me, trying to take my firearm from me, as long as I don't let go of that grip, it knows that I'm the authorized user. So my hand could be way out here, and it knows that I'm the authorized user. Now look what happens as soon as I release the grip and try to fire again. It's red. Now that could have been you taking it from me, and it recognizes that that person that's holding the handgun at that time is no longer the authorized user. Now if I take it again, it knows that I'm the authorized user.
All right, so if I wrestle the gun from you,
won't fire.
okay.
So you give it back to me, it knows I'm the authorized user.
From fingerprint ID to mobile app tracking systems, this is not the only smart gun technology available. In fact, in October, Silicon Valley investment group SmartTech announced a $1 million grand prize to the inventor of the next innovation of smart gun technology. Still, the IP1 is getting the most attention. Armatix is currently looking for a retailer to sell its guns in the United States. The range and shop it had been operating out of received so much backlash from the NRA and other gun rights activists that they're no longer working with Armatix or even willing to sell its products. We asked the NRA to speak with us about their very public opposition to the IP1 and other smart guns. They declined. But David Higginbotham, a gun writer and reviewer for GunsAmerica.com, tracks and critiques new firearms. He says he completely understands why the gun lobby is against smart gun technology.
Any delay whatsoever in the ability for the weapon to fire could mean the end of your life. You have to access the gun has to be able to work instantaneously. This is an industry that measures success by hundredths of a second. When you talk to law enforcement officers, they talk about the response time. They talk about the split time between shots. How fast can you make one shot? How fast can you make follow-up shots? How accurately can those shots be made? Beyond that, you're trusting your firearm to your watch.
What if someone overpowers you and gets the gun and the watch?
If this handgun is taken from you and the person is much larger, one thing that we can do is we can manually deactivate the handgun. So if I knew that it was only you and I in the room and you take this gun from me, all I have to do is press the same button that I used to program it. I press this down, deactive.
So that's like a panic button.
Panic button.
On the watch.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It'll deactivate the firearm.
In my mind, this is a dubious proposition. How many watches have I had that have gone bad? How many batteries do you have to change? How reliable is the technology itself? What sort of delays do you have between accessing the weapon and the weapon being able to function? And what happens if the access system itself fails? Whether it's biometric or RFID, there's always something else that stands between you and the pulling of the trigger.
Despite the staunch opposition from gun rights advocates, Belinda Padilla says she isn't giving up. Armatix plans to have a 9mm model available later this year.
I'll tell you, I hear so many objections, and it's like, we're not going to solve all the problems. We're going to solve little kids picking up handguns. We're going to solve the guns being stolen. The goal is not to prevent everything. The goal is to make it harder for someone to use the gun against you.
So it seems like there may be some work to be done with the technology advancing, but there's also a lot of work to be done with society's reaction to it.
Gun rights activists are having a very different reaction. And what's interesting, it's kind of ironic, they're lobbying very hard against this technology and against this actual product, when what they're really upset about is legislation. There's a law on the books in New Jersey now that says that once this technology has become available in the United States, within 3 years, every gun sold in New Jersey has to be a smart gun.
So it all comes down to that law in New Jersey and the technology. So that's what everybody's upset about.
Absolutely. And California's looking at similar legislation. So gun rights activists are very fearful of this technology because they feel like it's a slippery slope. Once New Jersey adopts that, then are they going to mandate that everybody has to have smart gun technology? And most gun rights enthusiasts, they don't want this kind of gun. They don't want those added safety measures.
I find it amazing that laws are being written up on this technology alone, because it doesn't seem very robust.
No technology is absolutely foolproof. But the way I see this is, I know that there is a greater risk for me having a firearm in my house that one of my children is going to hurt themselves or each other or somebody else with that firearm. So this kind of technology, this kind of gun, I feel like would appeal to me more.
Let's say that this technology advances and advances, and we have a gun that only recognizes your handprint and you can only use it. Is something like that really going to make everyone safer? I'd like to hear from someone from the UK where they don't really even have that many guns, if there isn't a different solution than just technology.
It's an interesting point that you raise, because being British, guns are used very differently. They're not used as defense items. So the concept of a device talking to another device is really alien. It kind of adds that layer of, it slows the whole process down of using a gun. And that's why it seems to be ineffective, from my personal opinion.
I just think it's such an interesting story because the innovation seems relatively simple, but what comes from that and the controversy and the conversations get very complex. Kyle, you've got the next story for us, and you're looking at a danger right here in our backyard in Los Angeles and around the world.
Right. We've already seen the wide-scale destruction that earthquakes can do to a country like Japan, and they already had an early warning system. Now, researchers at Caltech are trying to set up a similar early warning system to help give us precious seconds before a similar disaster hits the U.S. Let's take a look. They are scenes of incredible power and destructive force. This is what a magnitude 9.0 earthquake can do. And this is what it looks like. Fear captured in real time by home video cameras rolling when the earth shook Japan, then shared on YouTube for the world to see. March 11th, 2011, 9.0 Japan. April 18th, 2014, 7.2 Mexico. August 23rd, 2011, 5.8 Virginia and the District of Columbia. October 17th, 1989, San Francisco.
What happened? There's a hell of an earthquake and we've got windows and everything that's falling out. Go ahead. Structural collapse of the entire freeway.
Earthquakes are still a big mystery, really. Trying to understand exactly what's happening on the faults while these things are sliding is one of the first-order physics mysteries out there.
There is nothing in nature like a seismic event, and no one knows that more than Dr. Tom Heaton. He has been studying quakes since the 1970s at America's preeminent seismic center, Caltech.
One of the things people don't like about earthquakes is when it starts, you really have no idea how big the shaking's going to get. If you're in the wrong place, it can be very terrifying. If you know you're in a place that's hazardous, you really don't know what's going to happen next.
But what if you could essentially slow down the inevitable, even just for a few seconds? Long enough to get out a warning. So what's going on?
So this is a simulation of a magnitude 7.8 on the San Andreas.
Earthquake.
And the system is telling us, tracking where the earthquake is here, would be showing up on my computer screen or your computer screen.
Earthquake. Strong shaking expected in 23 seconds.
Telling you where the shear wave is. We're here in Los Angeles. The P wave is headed for us.
So this red circle is here is what we have to worry about.
It's this shear wave that has most of the heavy shaking. It's headed towards us. The closer it gets to us, the stronger the shaking.
The system first senses the quake's P, or primary waves. That's the yellow circle on this model. They tell scientists a quake is coming, but don't cause any shaking. The red S, or shear waves, follow. They're the damage-causing waves. In this animation, the P waves hit Los Angeles 30 seconds before the S waves, and the shaking starts. That's how it successfully predicted the most recent quakes to hit Los Angeles, including one that struck in March of 2014. Scenes like this playing across TVs and the web, nerves were frayed. Ironically, the public never got an early warning because California's system is only a prototype, leaving most people frightened and surprised, including this local news anchor.
For a earthquake. Yep, we're having an earthquake.
His reaction immediately went viral. By comparison,
This is how Mexican TV covered the 7.2 quake that struck off the coast of Acapulco on April 18th, 2014. The anchorman comes on nearly 30 seconds before the quake strikes, giving him plenty of time to warn of the impending danger. You can see him react when the quake finally hits. Mexico's early warning system has been around since the devastating 1985 quake that killed more than 9,000. Japan was moved to action as well, creating their early warning system after the 1995 6.9 Kobe quake that killed 5,000. In fact, when the massive 9.0 quake hit Japan on that day in March 2011, the early warning system was working. Watch as this TV show is interrupted and the warning appears on screen. The host shifts gears and informs the audience a quake is on the way. This is Japan's government in action on March 11th. The alert has gone up on TV screens nationwide, but the Japanese system is not designed to track very large quakes. Ironically, when the quake hits, Parliament had little warning, as this raw footage shows. Japan's system is one of the most extensive in the world, with nearly 1,000 seismic sensors monitoring the Earth's movement.
Okay, so we're headed into the Pasadena seismic station.
In California, there are only 500 sensors in the system, like this one, buried in the hills near Pasadena, California.
Should we go down?
Yeah, let's go down. And I will follow. So this is similar, these green domes here are similar to what we were looking at back in the lab.
That's correct. So they're the real backbone of our seismic network. And again, they're sensitive enough to tell you where the moon is over your head.
Wow.
Because of the pull of the moon.
And they supply the data stream that turns seismic movements into those yellow P waves and red shear waves we saw back in the lab.
These devices here are the guts of the early warning system. They detect the motion that an earthquake produces. That's only the first part. The second part is sending that information at the speed of light to these electronics. These are what gets the information out to the rest of the system and lets us know when an earthquake is coming ahead of time.
From the moment the initial P wave readings come across the system to the time the S or shear waves strike, a lot can happen. Trains could be stopped, planes could be waved off landings, elevators could be sent safely to the nearest floor, and hospitals could go into emergency mode. Timing is everything.
So it is very much like watching the way a hurricane plays out, but everything happens very quickly.
Yeah.
In a hurricane, this would happen over a couple of days. In an earthquake, it happens in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
That means decisions about what to shut down have to be made in an instant, but even a few seconds warning can help save lives.
Having 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds of advanced warning is like a lifetime.
Kurt Kainzinger manages earthquake safety at one of LA's busiest medical centers, UCLA's Ronald Reagan Hospital.
You may have a patient that is open on the table undergoing a surgical procedure. There is a good chance that somebody is going to be right in the middle of a very delicate procedure when an earthquake occurs. If we have advanced warning, if we have 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds warning, there's a lot of things that we can do.
California has the only earthquake early warning system in the US. It is still years and many dollars away from becoming a reality, but they are working on it.
When I was a kid, the weather guys were not so good at this business, and over time they've gotten better sensors, they've gotten better ways to communicate. For us in the earthquake business, it's very similar to the weather business, but everything happens much faster in the earthquake.
Earthquake, very strong. Shaking expected in 2 seconds.
So after seeing this piece, what really stands out to me is a country like Mexico, a place like Japan, they have these early warning systems, yet we don't. Why not?
They had major earthquakes that killed thousands of people, and then they put these systems in. We're fortunate enough to not have a major disaster like that, but we want to prevent a major disaster like that. That's why we need technology like this. Get out ahead of a disaster rather than have one happen to us and then react.
From your segment, it seems like the technology that needs to be installed as a result of the warning system is massive.
You have to do these kind of long-term cost-benefit analysis. What is the cost of putting these things in versus the benefit of having them be shut down and not having them be super damaged in a large earthquake?
Is an earthquake categorically something that cannot be predicted in advance? Or is there anything going on that would enable us to predict when an earthquake's going to happen?
There's this really interesting phenomenon called ground lightning. When rocks are bent and crushed and compressed, the rocks actually emit a certain kind of electrical charge. It's very small, but if you could detect that before an earthquake, that travels at the speed of light, whereas these S and P waves only travel at the speed of sound.
Well, great stuff, Kyle. I'm sure Los Angeles will be sleeping a little bit sounder tonight, knowing that there are people out there working on this kind of earthquake technology. Guys, when you think of car-to-car communication, usually you think of maybe honking a horn at another driver, maybe giving them a certain hand gesture, like a thumbs up. But it just got a lot more technological. And now Wi-Fi is being put into cars to help prevent collisions. Take a look.
The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration worked with 9 major car manufacturers on a crash avoidance system called Vehicle-to-Vehicle Communication Technology, or V2V. Test cars that were fully loaded with a Wi-Fi-like system called Dedicated Short-Range Communication shared GPS location, speed, acceleration, gear and braking status, steering wheel angle, and the previous and predicted path, all in an effort to put the brakes on 80% of all non-impaired driver accidents. The system calculates the dangers and warns the driver about a car you can't see that's slamming on its brakes, or when it's not safe to pass a slow car, or a car in the blind spot during a lane change, first with an advisory, then with a warning, or when you have the right of way to make a turn, but the other driver's not paying attention. Unlike the driverless cars, vehicles with V2V don't ever have control, so you're still in the driver's seat.
So what do you guys think? I mean, normally when you hear of this type of advanced car technology, you think of you have to buy a really expensive car. But with this, they're thinking that there's additions you can put on any pre-existing car. It's pretty cool.
I think it's important to note that this is a crash avoidance system, so you're still able to drive your car and you're still getting warnings in various ways. It might be a vibrating seat or, you know, a flashing light, but you're still in control of your car. And it's important to make that distinction because there are driverless cars out there.
I wonder if it's going to add to distracted driving with this kind of sensory overload of all this stuff coming in at you while you're trying to focus on driving your car.
But I think it's probably the right sensory overload. You know, right now we're probably focusing on, can I look at my cell phone and not have a police officer looking at me? So now I think if these are the signals coming at us strong, they're the ones we should be listening to.
And distracted driving is what is going to lead to a lot of these collisions anyway, aside from drunk driving, extenuating circumstances like that. But if you did have some kind of sensor that actually kept you focused on driving, I think we forget right as we get behind the wheel that we're driving 2 tons of steel at 60 miles an hour. I don't think we should forget that so easily.
It's kind of like driving that 2 tons of steel in a bubble of safety.
It just gives you really nice environmental awareness of what's on the road ahead, and I think that sounds like a pretty good thing. Well, guys, great stories as usual. I love being able to talk this type of science and innovation on a weekly basis, and we'll bring you more next time here on TechKnow.
Dive deep into these stories and go behind the scenes at aljazeera.com/TechKnow. Follow our expert contributors on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and more.